We're live now from the studio, and joining me is Michael DePlata from Snowblind Studios. And if that name rings a bell, then you know it's time to talk The Lord of the Rings, War in the North. Michael, welcome to the set.
Thank you very much.
Really glad to have you guys here. I personally am a huge Lord of the Rings fan, and I'm super excited about this game. And so, yeah, let's just talk about it. What's the deal? Fanboy, rage subsiding, excitement subsiding. For folks, who know Lord of the Rings, it's a household name at this point. Obviously, War in the North, new game in the franchise. What are you guys doing with it? Give folks the overview if they haven't heard of it.
So, I mean, the great thing with War in the North is obviously we're all huge fans of the films, huge fans of the books, and what's great here is that for the first time we've got the rights to the movies, but also the rights from the books. So we can set the game in the universe of the Peter Jackson films, which is phenomenal, but we can also take the story off into new directions as well, hence the War in the North, as opposed to the the more familiar Frodo's journey and so on.
You can mine all that deep fiction.
We can mine it. Yeah. And one of the things that's so fantastic about Tolkien's work and about Peter Jackson's vision of it is there is this almost, this fractal level of detail. So you can dig in anywhere, and there's this whole world of possibilities to explore. To really get the best of the both worlds, we can touch on the story at key points as we're paralleling Frodo's story,
and connect with those characters that are now an iconic part of the franchise because of the movies.
Yeah, precisely. So we meet Aragorn in Bree, we meet Gandalf and Elrond in Rivendell and so on, but then at the same time we also get to explore new parts in Middle-earth and new heroes that were referenced, and because the War of the Ring is this massive continent-spanning, war.
Huge conflict.
And you think of, for example, by analogy, all the stories you could tell in World War II, and there's an infinite number of possible stories.
Yeah, and that's a good analogy too, because you have, you guys, we saw the front that we see in the movies is mostly, the March of the Ring towards Mordor and Minas Tirith, versus Mordor, that whole battle. But you guys are on a different front.
Yes.
You're in the north.
Yep.
And so let's as we jump into the game here, we'll sort of set up for you folks what is happening in the north. But I want to talk about what we see on screen here, because the game has 3 protagonists.
Yes.
And we've got Farin, Andriel, Eredon.
Yep. So, clearly in the same way, we're obviously hitting on some of the very iconic archetypes of those films and those books. So it is a fellowship of the different races of Middle-earth.
Yep.
So Farin is a champion of Erebor. So Erebor is the Lonely Mountain, which of course we're going to be seeing a lot more of in the near future with The Hobbit and so on.
Hobbit movie, sure.
So he's one of the elite warriors from there. Andriel, who's a lawmaster from Rivendell. So we saw some of the sort of the magic and the forces of nature and magic that Arwen could use when she took down the Ringwraiths, for example. So we can explore more of that and that type of character. And then Eredon's a ranger, and obviously Aragorn's one of the most
one of his
iconic.
kin.
Yes. So one of his kin as well, trained at the same schools, watched the same TV shows.
Great. All right. So now, because there's 3 characters, this is a 3-player cooperative game. We're just going to be playing with one character here, but all of them are going to be there.
Yeah.
All of them are going to be in the action.
Absolutely. So what's fantastic about this game, it's by Snowblind Studios, who basically invented and defined the action RPG genre on console with this incredibly fun multiplayer. So it's really the spiritual successor to that game as well. So there's only one campaign, and it's the co-op campaign. But if you're not playing so your friends can drop in and drop out at any time, can play on the sofa or online, can play 1, 2, or 3 players, and then the other 2 characters are filled in by bots as well. So in this case, we're going to play the single player.
Great. Well, let's start it up and see what's in store and get a taste for the action here in War in the North. Now, are you gonna, as we load it up, are we set the stage for where in the campaign we are here?
So this is actually quite early in the campaign. I'm going to choose Farin, who's the dwarf. And what's happened, Agendaur, who's one of Sauron's chief generals, he's been put in charge of the northern front. And his job up there is to gather armies of shadow that, if they had have succeeded, would have opened this front and taken down Minas Tirith. So our mission here, it's early in the game, is to find intel about what he's doing, where these armies are gathering, and to try and stop that. So it's basically a sort of behind enemy lines commando mission. And this particular place, this is Fornost, so it's an ancient fortress in the north of Middle-earth. It was in the kingdom of Angmar, and it started being reoccupied by orcs and goblins and other dark and nasty things.
And that's one of the great things about, heading north. That in that Tolkien literature, like you were saying, there were kingdoms that fought and, kingdoms that fell in that area. And so, the land sort of has this, you have these old fortresses, you have this inheritance of conflict that you guys can explore a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you've got a history that goes back thousands of years and covers countries and races. Again, it's like imagining Europe. I mean, how many stories or movies or things can you tell? And that's the great thing about Tolkien, because he spent his entire life making this world and the richness of this world, and almost invented the world so that it was almost incidental that the stories could take place. And I don't think there's any other world that compares to that level of detail, because it wasn't even made with that intention necessarily at the beginning. So you can touch on the world anywhere, and there's just amazing stories and things to explore in it.
Now I gotta talk about what we just saw on screen. We saw eagles, and then it said to call me, press right trigger plus A. So hopefully that bodes well for what we see in the future in this demo. But now we're at the Citadel of Fornost. You're playing as the dwarf, and are we going to come up against some orcs pretty soon here?
We are. So they've occupied the fortress. They've also fortified it here.
Yeah, I'm about to say that fortress isn't looking so destroyed. It's looking pretty good.
So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use my war cry here. So I'm going to charge into the front first, take down these guys.
And you can see arrows whacking into the other enemy, your allies behind.
So even though Andriel and Eridan, they're playing as AI, so they're sort of letting me take the lead, but they're giving really good support with his archery skills and so on. So they actually do a really good job on that. I'm going to race forward. I'm going to try and take down this crossbow guy up here. And one of the great things as well, one of the great things about this camera is it's got a really good range combat as well as our melee combat, and it's very, very easy to switch between the two. So take this guy down. Aim. And actually I can just press up on the D-pad and I can just ask my companions to try and take him down as well.
Oh, nice.
I might even flick back.
Direct there.
And so I just popped down on the D-pad and I asked Andriel to give me some support, so she's popped up this defensive shield.
Nice.
And that actually gives us protection from him, so we can try and snipe him from here. And there's a headshot and some bonus points as well. And then so playing well and using skill then feeds into the XP, so I'm leveling up my characters faster.
Okay, and now we used an ability earlier. Are you leveling up to earn new abilities or to improve the strength of your attacks? Stuff like that. So
again, with Snowblind Heritage as well, it's an action RPG. So the loot, the skills, the upgrades are like a huge part of the depth of the game. And one of the things that I really like, so obviously each of these characters can hit kind of the classic archetype. So Farron as the dwarf, he can be a really classic tank.
You have to wade in there.
Yeah, wade in, use his war cry so he can take more damage, not get knocked down as you see there and so on. But there's also different upgrade paths for each of these guys. So you can upgrade him around his crossbow and his range skill and give him repeat fire and stuff, so he can almost become like a range assault guy. Or you can upgrade him around the war cry so that it buffs the allies, so he can basically take more of a support role. And the same goes for for all of the classes. Even within the combat, he can focus on his sword and shield, so his defensive skills, which let him do really powerful shield bashes and then later shield charges and so on. Or you can upgrade him to two-handed weapons, so he can really wade in. So we've got the three classes, but then within each class there's a huge amount of flexibility and so on as well. And then literally thousands of items of loot and so on for them to upgrade as well.
Thousands? Now, what kind of loot are we talking here? Like a new shield, new weapons, new armor?
Yep, actually if I just clear this guy out, we'll go off and see if we can show off some of that as well.
He's got some abilities of his own.
Yeah, he's got the shield here as well, so he's actually protecting his other minions, not that it did him any good.
From range strikes, but...
Exactly, but not from an axe in the head.
And yeah, actually, so we saw that was a critical strike before one of the... Oh, here we go, loot. Loot time. Let's talk about loot.
Okay, so yeah, there's a bunch of stuff we can grab here. And I've also been able to level up, so strength helps my melee combat, dexterity helps my range combat, stamina is my health, and this is my abilities. But the good thing is all of those skills are useful to each class, so it's not like I've got the dwarf, so he's a fighter, so
just put strength all the way,
because my range combat's really useful, health's obviously useful, and my skills are really useful. So there's a real decision and depth in the upgrades each time. And then the skills, again, as I said, I can upgrade towards two-handed weapons. I can upgrade towards shield bashes and defensive skills, which are pretty cool. And I can update some sweeping attacks, or I could go towards my range combat.
So here's a question. You've got your character here. You're leveled up a little bit. You've got some abilities. You've got some new gear. What happens if you then go drop into someone else's game and play as the dwarf? Are you bringing these attributes into the game? Does that person's game state determine what your attributes are like? How does that work?
Yeah, so that's a great thing about this, because it's drop in, drop out co-op, and you've got your loot and your player progression, but you always take your character online as well.
Okay.
When you go into the other game. And the thing is, so I'm leveling up Farron, the dwarf here, but when I level up, I'm leveling up my whole team, my whole fellowship. And I can actually give items and give loot to the other characters as well.
And now if you have leveled up one of them, do you also, from a menu, can you assign their skill points, or are those auto-assigned?
They're auto-assigned while I'm playing it, but if I go back to the hubs, so when I'm in Rivendell or Bree and I can change characters, then I can reassign their points
you can
as well.
respect them.
Yeah, so we don't want you to sort of stop and get slowed down while you're playing the game, and especially when you're playing co-op.
Yeah.
But also you do have the ability to change your characters around and so on as well.
That was a lot of spinning.
Yeah, that was. It's pretty effective as well.
Yeah, that worked really.
And then the other thing that you get is you can see the meter up on the guy's head. So as you pull off the critical strikes, not only do they do more damage, but they put us into what we call heroic mode, which is a little bit like the sort of combat system in Batman, where we're really rewarding you, keeping your hit streak, keeping your rhythm up, using skillful combat, doing more damage, escalating that, getting more XP. So there's really skill and depth into the combat system as well.
And you folks can see a visual indicator of that with the whole, it just said legendary sever, times 10. So that was because you had been keeping it going for a while, you achieved that multiplier?
Exactly, and then once you kick into that mode, so it's not only the multipliers, but then because we're also the first mature rated Lord of the Rings game, we can start really getting quite realistic on the combat, in the sense that limbs are flying and heads are flying, and there's more fatalities and so on. So
yeah, that's not just that sever is not mere lip service. You are actually severing limbs and causing a good amount of blood to come out of these orcs.
And basically, it's not. I wouldn't say it's gratuitous, but it is certainly in keeping with the level of violence and the intensity that you see in the movie. So when Aragorn's fighting Lurtz, and he's sort of taking his leg off, taking his head off, Lurtz pulling the sword out of his chest. So it really enables us to be very faithful and authentic to the style of the films as well. And it also means you can get things like headshots on the combat as well. So you can get headshots. You can also shoot them in the legs, which will slow them down as well. So there's really depth in the range combat as well as the melee.
And so now and you're using a sword now. You've switched out.
Yeah, I just switched that out. And the nice thing is, our team's really done a great job. So everything you equip, all of this gear, really shows up properly on the character as well, of all of those items.
As does apparently a good amount of orc blood.
Indeed, what every fashionable dwarf is wearing this season. So we head up here, and the thing I haven't used yet is the other feature that we have to support the Fellowship. So there's these three that you're playing with, but sort of what we consider the fourth member of the Fellowship is Belleran. He's one of the great eagles. And you can call him in, but not too frequently. He's not there to sort of be your personal pet. But in times of like intense combat, you can call him in, and he can either smash through masses of orcs or take down some of your larger enemies, which you see here. So what we've got to do is these two guys. These are actually Elrond's sons.
Yeah, I thought those names looked familiar.
Again, another example of where you can find this little detail in the books and dig